we are planting our second crop of potatoes. We're a couple weeks late, but y'all, life was lifing.
And it sure was. But we listened to y'all suggestions about how to get a bigger potato harvest with a bigger potato sizes.
Make sure to check out our potato harvest video if you haven't already. We'll put a link at the very end of this video.
And these suggestions better work, y'all.
They better work. Let's get into it.
We're conducting a couple of experiments with the second round of potatoes. Firstly, we had to decide what potatoes we wanted to use and the experiments we wanted to conduct. We chose to go with 3 potato varieties that either provided more health benefits or gave us some of the larger sizes that we were hoping for in our first harvest. These turned out to be the Eva, Satina, and Blue Adirondack potatoes. As for the experiments themselves, we made 3 different groups. Experiment number 1, potato chunks. We cut 1 potato from each variety into 3 to 4 chunks with 1 eye on them. Now, it was a bit difficult to get only 1 eye on each due to the weird growth pattern of the sprouts, but we tried our best. Before we started planting them, we had to prep our soil. We used the same soil that we used for our potatoes earlier in the season and last season, and we just gave it a little refresher with some bone meal and blood meal to ensure that the potatoes are absorbing good concentrations of both nitrogen and potassium to encourage their growth throughout the season. Some people like this method of cutting potatoes into chunks because it saves the amount of seed potatoes that you are using. Say if you only have 1 potato but it has multiple eyes on it, you can cut it into multiple chunks with the eyes, so then you can have multiple plants that you can put in separate containers or areas in the ground. Typically, people that use this method let the potatoes dry out and scab over by letting it sit in a dry place with lots of aeration at least overnight to prevent the cut potato from rotting and becoming diseased. But this was the only time we had to plant the potatoes, and we desperately needed to get them in the ground since we were already a little late. So as an alternative, we dipped the exposed sides of the chunks into some sand because sand has the ability to remove excess moisture, which helps to prevent rotting. Once we finished seasoning our chunks with some good old sand, making them look like some batter dipped fish or some chicken nuggets, we placed them into our 10 to 15 gallon grow bags with a few inches of distance between them. Then we covered them with about 2 to 3 inches of soil, and of course we had to put our labels, y'all. Don't forget your labels or time will get hard for you, okay? Trust us, it's happened to us plenty of times before. After we finished the Eva, we went ahead and repeated the process with the Satina and the Blue Adirondack potatoes, and then we moved on to the next experiment. Experiment number 2, 1 whole seed potato with 1 eye. As the name suggests, we want to determine whether reducing the amount of plants in a container or area will give us a greater yield. As many of you mentioned already, sowing 1 seed potato will allow the plant to use more nutrients available in the soil, create more energy, and give it more space to grow a bigger harvest. For each of the 3 varieties, we chose 1 seed potato and removed all but 1 of the eyes, or so we hoped. Again, it was a bit difficult to ensure that we only had 1 eye remaining since the growth pattern of the sprouts were so complex. We planted them about 2 to 3 inches from the bottom of the bucket as suggested by one of our subscribers, thank you, and we used food grade buckets to help distinguish it from the other experiment in the grow bags. Of course, with any experiment, you must have a control group, which is a group that is not treated or changed in any way. This helps to more accurately compare the results from the untreated group and the experimental groups. Control group, 2 to 4 or more potatoes with all eyes on him. Besides planting many seed potatoes in 1 bag, we typically left around 2 eyes on each of the 4 to 8 potatoes in what we thought were efforts to help the plants conserve energy for growing the tubers. As it turns out, that method is not recommended by some, if not many. Why, you may ask? Well, each eye turns into 1 plant. So if you plant a lot of seed potatoes in 1 area and they just happen to have multiple eyes on them, you're probably going to end up with a whole lot of plants in 1 area that are competing for limited space and nutrients. Now, don't get us wrong. We did get pretty decent harvests both earlier in this season and the previous season when we started planting potatoes. However, we're hoping that this experiment will help us determine the better method for yielding bigger and better harvests moving forward. Like I mentioned before, we didn't have a lot of sprouted potatoes remaining for these varieties, so instead of planting the typical 4 to 8 in a grow bag, we were able to plant 2 to 4. And we made sure to keep all those big, long, and chunky eyes on these taters so that a lot of stems will grow in the bags, resembling the conditions of the potatoes in our previous growing seasons. After we planted all of our potatoes, we made sure to give each and every one of them a good, nice, thorough drink of water to make sure they have enough moisture in our scorching hot summer heat. What's y'all's weather like out there? Let us know in the comments down below. But that's it for our experiment, y'all. So we will be sure to give some updates along the way and let y'all know what these potatoes are looking like.
All right, y'all, we just finished planting our second crop of potatoes.
We planted 3 varieties: Eva, Satina, and Blue Adirondack.
We also had 3 experiments. The first one was having a control group where you planted it how we would usually plant it. Our first experiment where we cut them into chunks with 1 eye, and then our second experiment where we had 1 seed potato with 1 eye.
So we're gonna leave these in the bags and the buckets until harvest time. So we'll check back with y'all at that time.
In a few months. We'll see y'all later.
Thanks for watching.